Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. Today, friends, we're just going to be talking about all things about getting hired at your favorite coffee shop, or maybe just a coffee shop.
Yeah.
I just think back to, for those of you who have been listening to the podcast, know this story, but for a hot minute, especially when I was just getting into coffee, I just wanted a coffee job. And I could not find a coffee job. I could not find a job anywhere. Like even McDonald's freaking would have hired me.
Dude, I applied at Starbucks, got denied, dude.
Same. I didn't even get a call. Nothing.
No call, dude.
Nothing. It was terrible.
Left on red, dude.
Yeah. So that was just like a very unfortunate time for me. And also realizing that interviews are no fun and applying for jobs is already, can be intimidating. So today we're going to try to hopefully help one of you guys land a job somewhere in coffee.
Dude, before we get too deep in that episode, I'm just going to do a hot take. Like, if you really want a coffee job, don't apply at a coffee shop. Just start your own cafe. Okay.
No, that was the worst advice you've heard on the podcast. That
was my point. If you've listened to this podcast long enough, I bet there's people thinking like, literally thinking and processing it that way. Don't do it.
I hope so.
Do not do it. Like, do not. And going back to your first reference, like we're getting too far into this episode already, but going back to your first reference, you said your favorite coffee shop, and then maybe any coffee shop. You changed it up. Dude, stop. People got to stop being picky. Like, if you want a coffee job, if you want to work in specialty, just apply to any coffee shop. Take what's given. If you have zero experience, stop. Just go whatever. All right, let's drink some batch.
I reckon.
I feel like this episode's already getting spicy. There's gonna be some hot takes. Dude, there's gonna be some hot takes.
We'll see.
So I know I've been like interviewing and hiring people for over the course of the last I've been interviewing and hiring people for almost 7 years.
Nice.
Almost 8. It's like, I think my first year in coffee, I only interviewed and hired one person. That's it. And then since then, it's been every single. I was part of almost every single hire.
You got a professional hirer right here.
Dude, I don't know if that's a good thing, dude. My turnover. I wish there was a stat, like if we made like, hockey cards or baseball cards, and there would be a turnover stat, like batting average.
Yeah.
I don't think mine would be too hot.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm the best. No, I'm just kidding. No, we're fine.
You know what they say.
There's pros and cons. A lot
hire
of
fast, fire fast.
Dude, a lot of the people that I've literally, dude, a lot of the people I've hired and like trained and moved on, like, are icons, especially in Bellingham. Like, I'm thinking of the fella, the good person that was on our podcast now owns a cafe. When we interviewed him,
that's true.
He didn't own one. He owns a freaking pop and coffee shop. Did you see Hillary Swank was at his coffee shop and did a freaking thing? Did you see the other influencer? Dude, he's going off, and I don't know. I'm going to stop hyping Mike up. Everybody go to Cafe Blue. Dude, solid. Solid brew. Why is this coffee tasting better than it ever was? This coffee's epic. I don't
think it's better than it ever was.
I've always liked this coffee.
I think
this coffee is
you just haven't drank it in a while.
I was always on the Agaro train, dude, from day one.
Yeah.
This coffee is outstanding. I love this coffee. I want more.
No, it's actually very, very...
Dude, this tastes like a geisha.
No, friends, no. That's not what it tastes like at all.
Dude, florality?
No.
Dude,
bro, not a geisha. No.
Dude, does this not taste like passion fruit to you?
Listen, it's
passion
good.
Fruit?
No, it doesn't.
It tastes like passion fruit.
Not at all.
Tastes a little bit like white peach. And like florals. Jasmine is going off. That was on our original flavor notes. The oolong tea thing is not there. It's more peachy than oolong tea. This coffee's complex, juicy. It's outstanding.
I'm To me, it doesn't taste like a geisha, but it does taste. I was not expecting. This is actually this is really good.
Really good.
Like shocking how. I think this is also like. I mean, I guess it's not that. I don't know what. A month and a half off of roast. When was the last time we roasted this?
Yeah.
Some extra. A month and a half off of roast, and not quite a year after harvest.
Yeah. Oh, I brewed this coffee on batch this morning.
This coffee? No.
Yeah. I stole a bag like a month ago on the last roast.
Is this better than your brew this morning?
I didn't drink it. I just brewed it for Maddie, so I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah. But this, I mean, it's actually surprisingly nice. I think Christopher Farron, if I'm not mistaken, mentioned that these coffees from the Agara region in Ethiopia have a tendency to get better with age.
Makes sense.
And we're not talking about that
roast age. You're talking about green.
Yes, green age, but we're also not implying like we should like age this coffee for. No. We're just saying that it actually
it's a longer shelf
opens
life.
Opens up, and especially since it's a washed, which probably gives it a little more longevity. But man, I mean,
dude, this coffee just
this is very nice.
There's some berry on it now. I'm getting like a raspberry iced tea.
Oh, dang! You're right. As it cools, it actually opens up really nicely. This is wow. I don't know. This is actually impressive. This is like a genuine reaction. This is a surprise.
Yeah. And by raspberry iced tea, I'm not talking about sweet tea. It doesn't have that big sweetness that we naturally get from naturals. It has a very like juicy tart sweetness to it.
Yeah, this is wow.
It's so good.
Wow. Well, that was a very pleasant surprise. I was not expecting this coffee to just come through so nicely today on batch. So
I mean, unlike other Ethiopian coffees we've had that started tasting a little baggy after longevity and after age, like we've had so many bad experiences with Ethiopian coffees. I think we had a Guji that I was like, it was fine, but it faded really quick. Was it a Guji or something like that a while ago? It was fine. I was just not the one that I kept picking up chicken noodle soup on, and I was wrong on the flavor note. What?
I like that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I still like the Aliyah Majo from Catalyst that we got.
Yeah,
that was nice. A nice coffee. Yeah.
But also, yeah.
But anyway,
speaking of Ethiopia, I don't know. We haven't really sourced cupped in Ethiopians this year.
Right, I didn't realize that.
I don't know.
We missed on the Kenya train too. Dude, Scott just dropped or Prodigal just dropped to Kenya.
I don't know. Over time, I think I've just become less and less impressed with.
Half of our menu is just Colombian coffees, dude.
I'm not mad about that. Listen,
I mean, I'm not mad.
I'm delightful. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I remember this was like a year or two ago. Even on the podcast, you were saying that Colombia was probably your favorite origin, and I don't think I was saying that. I think I was actually more Ethiopia.
Yeah.
I think if I'm not mistaken.
You're more Kenya.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were definitely more Kenya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I was like, right now I think Colombia's.
Dude, also when we were
very nice and
when we
enjoyable.
were launching coffee, launching Mirror, I think that was also one of our first coffees. I remember you were like, "Hey, what coffee?" And I was like, "Let's like find something middle of the road, approachable from Colombia." And you were not having it. I don't think.
I wasn't having it. You were
just like, why? Why would we drop a Colombian as our first coffee?
Yeah, I mean, be honest, folks. I can't.
Was that our first coffee, or was it a Guatemalan?
No, it was a Colombian.
Yeah, it was a Manos de Mujeres from Red Fox.
Yeah, it was a Consuelo Gomez.
Oh, Consuelo Gomez. Yeah, that's what it was.
Friends, never forget.
Consuelo Gomez.
Don't forget
your first.
Yeah,
dude.
Come on, let's go,
dude. Red Fox. They brought us the goods back when Gabby was on the team.
Let's go.
Taking care of us so well.
It's good. Good. That being said, Serge, what was the first time you ever got hired for a coffee job?
Dude, actually, I was talking to one of my favorite food bloggers from Duval from 904, Nate. Nate does food, and he reminded me, he's like, oh, I just ran into Marcy from Sippers. Did you work there? And I was like, yes. Dude, Marcy is like the matriarch of my coffee journey. Like the mother of it all. She brought me into coffee with so much just generosity and grace to allow me to be ignorant behind bar and to learn things, and to also, it gave me a space to basically dive into something I had no idea I was getting into. Like, and you know what's the funny thing is, I applied at Bold Bean. I got the interview. I could have got the job because Jamie was the manager at Bold Bean in Jack's Beach. And I was actually supposed to work there and then go to their new location, San Marco, when they were opening that up. And the dream in Jacksonville, when I was living there at that point, was to work for Bold Bean. So like you're saying, like applying to all these locations, applying to all these cafes, I was just like, man, I hope I get the Bold Bean job. Like that was the dream for me. And I got the interview, and then unfortunately I wasn't able to make it. And then heard that a friend was stepping down as manager at Sippers, and they were like, you should apply for the management job. And I mean, again, like diving, folks who know my story and who have heard me talk about my coffee journey on the podcast, is I applied for a barista job. I've never pulled a shot of espresso. I've only brewed V60s at home. I knew barely anything about coffee. Was super intrigued because of traveling the world and seeing coffee from a coffee producer side and farming side, and seeing the potential of coffee across the globe. That's what got me into coffee. But I've never pulled espresso, like nothing. Like espresso machines at home weren't even that big of a thing. And basically went in, applied at Sippers, and got the interview. And during the interview process, like we won. I don't really remember how it went, but I do remember that I actually asked questions too. I didn't just answer questions. And we'll get into that. That's also an important facet of when you're interviewing for a coffee job, is that you ask questions. Not only just to get information for yourself, but it's intrigue and curiosity, and you actually knowing what you want out of a job is a positive sign that if you get the job, you're probably going to want to stay there or want to be there. So I remember asking questions like, hey, are you connected to our roasting? I already wanted to roast. That was day one. Like getting into that, I said, are you connected to a local roaster? And they were connected to Pura Bean. That's how I met Chris Dietrich. And I said, if I take the job, and they haven't offered me a job yet, I already took initiative in the interview and said, if I take the job, I require to get a internship at the roastery. Like sit in. I don't want to work for them. I don't want to get paid. I want to sit in. Free labor, or I just want to have eyes. And then the other things, like I said, can we serve pour overs? And they're like, yeah, we do. The funny thing is, after my interview, I get a call back, and Marcy was like, we actually want to offer you the management job. So my first ever coffee job was in management. I've only worked in management and coffee from day one. So, and that's kind of how the ball rolled. And honestly, I didn't apply for Social Grounds because Jason and I met through coffee, and Jason hired me from Sippers, offered me a job to work for them. And then that's where I became a GM. And then once I moved back to Bellingham, I was supposed to, you and I and our buddy, we were supposed to open up a cafe. That was initially why I moved back to Bellingham. And so I wasn't applying for that job. It was an offer to open up a cafe with a group of people who had some money that wanted to invest in the coffee. But then when I interviewed with Corey Makeworth, that was another good conversation. And again, sorry, I'm going on, so you can stop me at any point if you want to ask more questions. But again, in that interview, I think one of the things that I approached the interview with is, this is what I want out of this job. And I think it's very important if you're applying at a coffee job, and you have to know what you want, and you have to be able to communicate like, hey, I am applying for this because I want to work here. And by I want to work here, that doesn't mean like, hey, I'm applying here because I need to make money. That's not enough. You can make money doing anything else you want. You know, there's a lot of ways to make money on the internet without leaving your room. And that's not bad. You want to do that thing. But if you want a coffee job, know why you want that coffee job. On top of that, know why you're applying there. You know, I get a lot of people. I probably get 2 or 3 applications a week at Narrative. And obviously I don't hire everyone. But in the interview process, I always ask, like, what intrigues you about Narrative? Why do you want to work here? And sometimes, it's a good vibe, just does not cut it. Like if someone says, hey, it's a good vibe, and another person sitting there and said with the same level, there's like, the only difference in their answer is one says, oh, it's a good vibe, and the other person says like some detail or gives me some feedback about how they intentionally saw a barista serve another person, then I'm like, you know why you want to work here. It's a culture fit, right? And that's a biggest revealer to me. Like, okay, this person is one in tune. So again, my advice would be like, if you want a job at your local cafe, become a regular at that cafe. I mean, Trey from Moxie, when I hired Trey at Makeworth, Trey was a regular. He would sit at the same spot. I learned more about Trey as a regular that when I did have to interview him, I didn't have to ask much questions. Micah, that's another person. You know, so all of my favorite hires in coffee have been people who were either regulars in coffee. I already knew their coffee order. I knew what they like about coffee, and I knew their potential. So before you even apply and before you do a resume, just be a regular at a cafe. All right, I don't know. That was a 8-minute rant. 10-minute rant? 10-minute rant looks like it.
There's a lot there already. And I think I'm glad that it's not always like, hey, have 5 years of experience. I'm glad that, because I know, especially when I was looking for my first coffee job, I was like always afraid, man. Like I don't have like all these coffee shops literally in town, and they're not even the ones like, you know, Camber, Narrative, Makeworth, like not even those, just other ones that were like requesting like years of experience. I'm like, where am I? Like all of them. And I'm like, I literally cannot get a job because I've never worked at a place before. So, and how do you even get the experience to begin with? Because everybody's asking for the one with experience. And so, I'm glad that wasn't like nothing in your rant said that. And I also do think that there's actually other things that you could do that increase your chances of getting hired. And I'm glad you mentioned like being a regular, is because I think that's a really big thing, because, you know, a lot, this is all across coffee in general, whether you own a roasting company, a cafe, or you want to work at something, whatever. One of your biggest resources is knowing the right people. That's it.
Yep.
And if you can know the right people, you stand a much better chance. Like, I'm sorry, it's just the reality. Like, you just have a much better chance at getting whatever you're trying to ask for.
Yeah.
And being a good person and showing up and just doing what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like those very simple basics will like already get you like 60-70% of the way there.
Yeah.
Which means you're beyond the 50% point, which means you stand a pretty darn good chance.
Yeah.
And for me, like I remember like the way I got my first coffee job behind bar at Primer, I was literally a regular. And I was so much of a regular that they invited me to their cuppings when they were sourcing coffees. I told them which coffee to source before I was even on the team. And they went and bought it because I said so.
Yeah.
And I'm not even on the team. And that's me also with, I mean, at that time I was only working in coffee. I've only worked in coffee for 2 years. Like I was a complete amateur.
Yeah.
And I was already getting invited to these team like cuppings. And like, I was already talking to, you know, just befriending most of their team. So I was already like one of them. And so when I walked in, it was like, oh, cool. Like,
of course. Why would we not hire him?
Yeah. And so when it wasn't immediate, it was just like the opportunity came up where they needed to hire somebody. And I just happened to always be there.
Right.
Like, what are the chances
Yeah.
that they're going to be like, yo, we need to fill a spot?
Yeah.
And at that point, the interview is pretty much irrelevant.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, of course, I'm not going to say that it was like right away and instantaneously they wanted to like hire me, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I was attending monthly. I knew what they were serving. I knew the kind of coffees, the style, the service, the expertise. Like, I just knew all of that already before even getting hired. Like, when I got hired for my first coffee job ever, which was at the Woods Roastery, again, that was very much so a connection, because the guy who worked there in my position, there were two people that were needed for that position. One of them, his name is Austin. I went to high school with him. We played soccer all 4 or 5 years or so together. And so, again, he just knew that I wanted a coffee job. I already reached out to him beforehand. I was like, hey, Austin, like, are there any openings? And at the time, they didn't have openings.
Yep.
And he knew that I was kind of into coffee and interested in coffee. So when the opportunity arose and they needed somebody, he reached out to me. I came in with an interview with Shay, and he literally, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, the second thing he told me was like, hey, we're probably gonna hire you, but we just need to do this interview.
Yeah.
Like he was like, okay, this is just a hire. We just need to go through the process.
Yeah.
And
That makes sense.
that was like,
Yeah.
awesome. And I didn't have to, at that point, I didn't have to be like, yo, I worked this many years in coffee and I'm trying to trick myself into convincing them.
Yeah.
On the other hand, apart from tricking somebody to convince them, sell them, there is some things maybe that they should already know or come prepared. That being said, doing a little bit of preparation is always a good idea. Just don't just like wake up and rush to the interview with zero time thinking about it and hoping you can just wing it. Give us some practical tips.
Yeah, especially in the case of, let's say you're moving and you live in Texas and you're moving to Oregon and you need a coffee job. Or I'm thinking of my friend who worked at Narrative, Lindy. They were awesome, like phenomenal human being, and they decided to move to Portland. And I get a call from Hart that they're interviewing at Hart.
Oh, heck yeah.
The other thing is, if you are in that spot, there's a few things. One, like you said, having connections, even a little bit of a, what's it called? Rave reference, a good reference from someone in coffee, someone that you know or someone that you trust, but also someone that may have some kind of leverage in the coffee community that you're applying. Knowing that, being wise with your the people that you list on there is important. And on top of that, big mistake, don't submit a resume with like 4 or 5 pages of experience. Don't do it. If I get a resume that has actually more than a cover letter and 1 page, I kind of put it on the back burner. Someone applied and they had a 3-page resume. I didn't take it seriously.
Why?
A lot of experience does not necessarily communicate that you did good at your job. One, if I see a resume that has a new job every 6 months, probably not going to hire you.
So what's the power move to do there?
List. If you're applying for a coffee job, I would list 2 coffee jobs. Let's say you worked at 10 cafes, 2 coffee jobs that you had the best time at. Why? Because if I'm looking at those, I'm going to ask you questions based on those cafes.
Right.
And if those cafes you can talk highly about and how much you enjoyed your job, not how bad of experience you had or how bad your boss was, that stuff actually tells me I probably don't want to hire you. Probably. It's not a no. There's context for everything, right? But 2 cafes that you absolutely loved and maybe 1 other non-coffee related job.
Say I don't have any coffee experience. Like I literally had. What should I do?
List 3 jobs that you worked for a long period of time, and by that, at least a year. If it's under 12 months, I basically don't want to see it on a resume. List a coffee job that you can show longevity. Why? Because most likely the questions I'm going to ask is how you problem solved when you got conflict. I had one interview.
List a coffee job?
Or list a job where you problem solved.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. because one of my questions is going to be, how do you do with conflict resolution? Conflict is inevitable, especially behind a tight bar, especially in times of pressure, especially if you're working if it's a high volume cafe. If you don't know how to handle stress, then probably not the job for you. So list a job where you were there for an extended period of time and you actually had to resolve conflict. A lot of the times when I see resumes with a new job every 6 months, 3 months, new job, I don't care what your jobs were. I don't care if you worked for, Manhattan Onyx Coffee Lab and I don't know, whatever. But if you only lasted there 3 months, I have a hint that you probably didn't last past your first conflict. And in order to resolve that conflict, you jumped ship because you found a better job.
Okay.
So, and that's kind of how I see it. So please just list, if it's non-coffee jobs, just list jobs that you can talk about how you worked, how you overcame conflict. And if they're hospitality job, if you were I just applied someone who was a waitress or a hostess at The Fork. You and I love The Fork.
Yeah.
It's a respectable restaurant. It's not a coffee. They didn't do coffee there.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, that's cool. You actually worked there for over a year. That's impressive.
Right.
That's really good. It's not coffee related, but you work there. Hospitality. I know The Fork's hospitality. If you give me a job, if you tell me about a job that you were able to serve exceptional hospitality, yeah, I don't care what it is. I'm sold. Or if you're applying for a sales job and you sold, I'm thinking about if my buddy Silas applied to work at Mirror in sales, he sold luxury antique cars to people like Macklemore, nothing related to coffee. But if you can sell a luxury car to Macklemore, you probably know something about sales and customer service. You know what I mean? So stuff like that I'm like, oh, okay, sick. Longevity, experience that is transferable into the coffee industry. And again, we're not looking for you to know how to puck prep.
Right.
We're looking for you to know how to treat people well.
Right.
In guest engagement.
Yeah. I 100%. I think also even being some of your prep could be just literally what Sergi just mentioned, and sitting down before your interview and going through that and figuring out, okay, I've worked maybe a few non-coffee jobs, and figuring out how do those things relate to the coffee job that you want to get. Again, hospitality, if you've worked at a restaurant, not a cafe, that's relatable. That's an easy connection point. But figuring out, okay, what are the skills that I have built, or the skills that I've practiced and used in my current job, how do they relate to what I'm about to do in this coffee job?
Right.
You know what I mean? With Silas, it's being able to relate, okay, what are the skills? Well, I have to be really smart about what I say. I need to be able to learn how to talk with people, communicate, hear them out. Just figuring out where those two worlds overlap, and then just running that through your mind, because chances are they're going to ask you these things. Chances are they'll ask you about some uncomfortable situation in your past job. Don't just show up not knowing how you're going to respond to that, because chances are they will.
Yeah, I had a person one time tell me in an interview that they've never had conflict at their job. Red flag.
Yeah.
That means that literally speaks to me that you were just not aware of the conflict around you. That's not what I want. Major red flag. Don't say that. Little tidbit. Don't say you've never had conflict. Tell me how you resolved conflict.
I think the thought there was trying to portray yourself as a you're
peacekeeper kind of.
You're a peacekeeper, which is maybe the right motive, but in reality, in the big picture, chances are it's no, that tells me a different. You're communicating a different thing for somebody who's not just looking at face value things. So it's
also okay to say, I don't like conflict. Conflict makes me uncomfortable. Well, yeah, most people.
Yeah.
No one likes war. For the most part.
100%. Yeah. And so, I think trying to figure out how do your skills cater to whatever you're going to be, you might have to get a little creative, but you're already kind of at a disadvantage with the fact that you've never, not necessarily a disadvantage, but just that, yeah, if you've always worked, let's say, as a car mechanic, it's going to be a little challenging, but maybe taking some time to just prep and be like, okay, how does this relate to this coffee job that I'm going to be doing? So again, just a little bit of prep will go a far way. So
yeah, and I think all in all, to encourage, if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, yo, I really want to work in coffee, I don't know where to get started. There's a lot of tidbits you've probably heard over the course of all of our episodes about our stories and getting into coffee. That's one thing. But outside of ourselves, like I'm personally like really inspired and encouraged by Alex, the owner of Narrative. His story is he's only had literally one coffee job, and now he's the owner of Narrative. And he came from a non-coffee related background. I believe he was in construction, you know. And now he's
crazy.
Competed in U.S. Barista Championships, went to nationals, one of the best latte artists in the world, like, and an owner of a cafe, an absolute legend. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The guy walked in off the street, basically, and was like, dude, I love this coffee stuff. Kind of want to do it. I might, like, put all my bags in this chip, like, put all my eggs in this basket.
Yeah.
Or put on my Did I say put
chips in the bag?
Dude, I just flipped that around. That's embarrassing.
But yeah, that his story I was not expecting, and we had him on the podcast. This is like 5-6 episodes back, so if you haven't listened to it, go listen to it. It's a good one. But yeah, when he shared that story, I was like, I actually had no idea. The guy just got into coffee 6-7 years ago.
7, I think.
And to see where he is right now, it's like, whoa, okay. So you don't have like your prior experience doesn't really matter. There are much more important things at play.
The thing also, like, again, to kind of take from Alex and who he is, like, the dude is an absolute, like, just good human. Like, honestly, if he wasn't in coffee, he'd probably be like owning a bar or something. Like, he's built for hospitality. You know, because of how good of a human he is. And that's another thing. It's like, it's not hard skills. It's a lot of these soft skills that make you someone that's desirable to hire and to be in coffee. And, you know, so I would pay attention more to that. Don't get intimidated by you have never pulled a shot of espresso, but tell me that you want to learn and you're willing to put in the work. Yeah,
100%. So, well, friends, I hope you got something practical, something helpful out of this podcast if you're looking for a coffee job, or on the flip side, if you're hiring people, this is also pretty practical as well. It's like, if somebody says they've never had conflict in their job, it's a red flag.
And also, like, I hope this podcast actually turns into a little bit on the feed, if you're especially watching this on YouTube, like, coffee businesses, if you're looking to hire, just throw out your need for hiring. And if you're someone that's listening, it's like, I want to get into coffee, throw out your name, be like, hey, I'm willing to get into coffee, especially if you're willing to, like, transport and move. Like, let's make some connections in the comment section below, and let's bring some people into coffee. And maybe one day we'll hear another podcast episode from someone who's like, I listened to your podcast, I got into coffee, and now I own, you know, I don't know, most of Starbucks. I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Cool. Well, friends, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. And as we always say, remember, reflect what's good.